Boston, Massachusetts, and Senator Edward Moore Kennedy arrives to open a major new chapter in the saga of America's most eminent political dynasty. America's presidential elections are still a year away, but the race is now on in earnest. After almost 2 decades in public life, the last and youngest of the Kennedy brothers has finally decided that he too will seek America's top job. Coming from a family dogged by tragedy as well as triumph, Kennedy knows that he's taking an enormous risk, both politically and personally. But for his supporters, it's the answer to a dream.
This country is not prepared to sound retreat. It is ready to advance. It is willing to make a stand, and so am I. Today, I formally announce that I'm a candidate for President of the United States.
The applause is all the more rapturous now because for years Teddy has been keeping his supporters guessing in the game of where he went. Over those years, he's taken on the most nasty quality, far from the only segment of the American electorate. Many, he seems to embody the same
40, 50.
Oh, you mean you're off?
Thank you.
Very good.
Tragedies and their tragedies are now the stuff of American myth. The Kennedy myth began when Brother John stepped into the presidential ring back in 1959. To the public, he was a man who was different. He was glamorous, youthful, wealthy, and fashionable. Campaigning is part of the lifeblood of the Kennedy family. Brother Robert worked for John as campaign manager, and Ted, then 27, and his new wife Joan were part of the team. And the campaign version of a new frontier, a brave new world where all were equal and all was possible, won the hearts of the nation. In spite of opposition from the Republicans, led by Richard Nixon, John Kennedy was swept to office on a crest of hope. With John President, Robert Attorney General, and Ted in the Senate, the ambitions of the Kennedy family seemed fulfilled. But that ended in Dallas on November 22, 1963. Bullets from a high-powered rifle passed through John Connally and mortally wounded the President of the United States. The official investigating body, the Warren Commission, concluded it was the work of Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin, in the Texas book depository. Other theorists claim various conspiracies, from industrial hierarchies to foreign communists. This televised tragedy remains etched on the minds of the traumatized American people. And in spite of the fact that he led America deep into the Vietnam War, John Kennedy became a hero and a symbol, as Ted was later to recall.
But I do feel that he did give a sense of a perspective, a sense of confidence to people and the young people, particularly in the United States. And I think that this was a source of inspiration to people throughout the world.
Sometimes it seemed as if the Kennedy family simply attracted tragedy. Only 6 months later, in June 1964, it was Teddy's turn. A light plane in which he was traveling crashed. No one was killed, but Teddy's back was broken, and it was to be 6 months before he could stand up. Nevertheless, he managed to run an election campaign from his hospital bed and was returned to the Senate with 74% of the total vote. To this day, he wears a back brace with a heating pad that he plugs in when working in his office. Some attribute his fiery bursts of temper to bouts of pain. But Kennedys don't give up, and out of the tragedy came the determination to keep alight the flame that John had fired. John's memory was honored here in London, as in many parts of the world. It was his inspiration that the Kennedy family remembered through all their hard times. There was happier news in 1967, when Teddy Kennedy's wife Joan gave birth to their third child, Patrick. A self-confessed homebody, Joan found marriage to a Kennedy a strain. She'd suffered repeated miscarriages, which to her seemed a further failure compared, for example, with the healthy brood of Robert's wife, Ethel. She herself admitted that it was hard to keep up with the Kennedy clan, dominated as they were by the ambitions of millionaire industrialist Joseph Kennedy. Years later, Joan said, "I tried to keep up with the Kennedys, bouncy and running all over, but I could never do that." With John assassinated, it was now Robert who stepped into the limelight. Internationally, he kept the flag flying with trips like this one to Berlin for meetings with the city's mayor, Willy Brandt. The trip echoed an earlier, more famous one when President John Kennedy committed America to the defense of the beleaguered city. Back in America in 1968, the big news was that Eugene McCarthy had crippled Lyndon Johnson in the critical New Hampshire primary. Robert leapt into the presidential race. The public thrilled. The dream had come again. And once again, the promises were to the blacks, the dispossessed, the hungry.
This is the year we can make the change, and we can make it through the ballot box. Violence or lawlessness or rioting makes no sense whatsoever in the United States. But the way that we're going to make a difference is whether if people work together. If whites and blacks make an effort together. If I'm elected president of the United States, I'm going to work for those who are deprived, those who are poor, those who lack jobs, those who lack decent education and lack a decent housing, whether they be white or black. That I pledge to.
But once again, it was violence that smashed the dream. In June 1968, a bullet from the gun of another lone gunman cut down Robert Kennedy while he was campaigning in Los Angeles. The world gasped in disbelief. To Americans, it seemed like a nightmare. Robert left behind him not only 8 children, but also a pregnant wife. Ted was now the leader of the Kennedy clan, which was to increase his stature in the Senate.
I hope the countless thousands who have sent their
Rose Kennedy had now lost 3 of her 4 sons to violent deaths, and understandably didn't want to lose the last. She extracted a promise from Ted that he wouldn't run while she was alive. Rose and Joseph Kennedy and Ted thanked the nation for their condolences.
We cannot always understand the ways of Almighty God, the crosses which he sends us, the sacrifices which he demands of us. But we know his great goodness and his love. And we go on our way with no regrets for the past, not looking backwards to the past, But we shall carry on with courage.
We'll never be able to express adequately in words our thanks, but we will in our deeds, in our public and private lives. And to those who began the campaign and carried on the campaign for the ideals which Robert Kennedy believed, that dream still remains. Those hopes still remain. And each of us will have to decide in a private way, in our own hearts, in our own consciences, what we will do in the course of this summer and in future summers. And I know we'll choose wisely.
Ethel's baby was born a month later, and Teddy, already a surrogate father to John's children, now included Robert's.
We want to say how happy we are today, and I told Ethel that I think Joan and I are going to take this baby home. We think Ethel has enough of them at home anyway.
True to Kennedy tradition, Teddy pulled himself up from Robert's death and was soon back out on the hustings, this time campaigning for Hubert Humphrey. He carved out areas of expertise in civil rights and law enforcement. In 1969, he was elected Senate Democratic Whip, a job he later lost through neglect. At the time, many thought it was now Teddy's turn to pick up the Kennedy torch and run for president. But he insisted that the Senate and the extended family came first.
Well, I just say that I think the fact of my candidacy for the assistant leader shows, hopefully, my commitment to Senate business. And this is a time-consuming responsibility, and I look forward to that work. I don't think it has really any implications beyond that.
Any secret presidential hopes that Teddy may have had for 1972 ended here at Dyke's Bridge on Chappaquidick Island. On the night of July 18th, 1969, Teddy Kennedy went to a cookout at this cottage on Chappaquidick. After several hours, Kennedy left. With him was a 28-year-old girl, Mary-Jo Kopechne. He claimed later that they intended to return to their separate hotels in Edgartown for the night. But instead of driving to a ferry crossing, Kennedy turned right down a sandy track that leads to a deserted beach. The car plunged off narrow, humpbacked Dyke's Bridge and landed upside down in 6 feet of water. Kennedy says he nearly drowned, but struggled free. Kopechne did not. There was a house nearby, but strangely, Kennedy didn't summon help. Instead, he walked back to the cottage to get 2 friends. The friends dived repeatedly for Kopechne, but to no avail. Incredibly, Kennedy claims that he then swam back across the channel to his hotel. Kennedy instructed his friends to tell no one of the accident, and although there was a phone, he did not report it to the police. He did, however, try to call a lawyer. It was only when he heard that the wrecked car had been discovered that he went to the police. Later, he tried to explain his actions on national TV.
All kinds of scrambled thoughts, all of them confused, some of them irrational, many of them which I cannot recall, and some of which I would not have seriously entertained under normal circumstances went through my mind during this period. They were reflected in the various inexplicable, inconsistent, and inconclusive things I said and did, including such questions as whether the girl might still be alive somewhere out of that immediate area, whether some awful curse did actually hang over all the Kennedys.
Kopechne's death and Kennedy's actions have been the subject of a police inquiry and countless media investigations. The Kopechne parents received $140,000 from Kennedy. Joan was pregnant at the time of the Kopechne funeral. Later, she suffered her 3rd miscarriage. Kennedy has stuck by his account. He insists he wasn't drunk. He acknowledges that he was irresponsible in not phoning the police promptly, but says he hit his head in the accident and was suffering from shock and confusion. But the shadow of Chappaquidick has haunted Kennedy. Many thought him forever ineligible in any presidential race. At the inquest, Kennedy pleaded guilty to leaving the scene of an accident. Even the inquest judge was skeptical of Kennedy's version of the story. The senator got a year's probation and a short-term driving suspension. Later that year, the Kennedys suffered another blow. In November, the family gathered at the seaside home of Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy. The family patriarch, Joseph, had died of a heart attack, aged 81. But once again, Teddy rose above his troubles. And when he campaigned for George McGovern in 1972, America could see that the Kennedy gift for oratory was still alive.
We know the record of this administration on every issue, and the four horsemen of ancient name bore the names of war and pestilence, famine and death. And now in the government of Richard Nixon, the four horsemen are riding again, and they bear the names of incompetence, favoritism, secrecy, and corruption.
And certainly the Kennedy name was far from dead. At the 1972 Democratic Convention in Chicago, Kennedy and McGovern were side by side. No matter what the past record, Teddy had the Kennedy myth, and that was still a force to be reckoned with. Between the 72 and 76 elections, Kennedy embarked on a series of foreign visits. Tokyo was one of them. He was already well versed in American domestic politics, but meetings with foreign leaders in the developed and the developing world are imperative to any politician who aspires to high office. In fact, Kennedy's foreign policies generally reflect the Democratic Party line, and, Northern Ireland apart, he has taken few initiatives of his own on foreign affairs. But trips to foreign capitals have given him first-hand experience of international problems. Joan Kennedy frequently accompanied her husband on his trips abroad, but their personal life together was providing an increasing amount of material for the gossip writers. Joan was talented and attractive, but the strain of keeping up with the Kennedys was beginning to take its toll. Joan, as she later admitted, became a heavy drinker, and the gossips weren't slow to point out the effect that would have on Teddy's presidential ambitions. Meanwhile, there were plenty of other rumors about Teddy's continued attractiveness to women. Joan has begun to tackle her alcohol problem, but for the past 2 years, the couple have been living apart. Foreign affairs do present a special problem for Ted Kennedy. His brother John's record, in retrospect, was adventurous, to say the least. The Bay of Pigs, the virtual launching of the Vietnam War. And today, it's not just big power politics. The third world must be respected too. Bangladesh is one of the world's poorest countries. Kennedy is a millionaire several times over. So rich, he's one of the few US senators who don't depend on donations from political pressure groups. In the Senate, it's been one of his big political strengths.
When you visit the members of your congressional and senatorial
America has its
delegations,
underprivileged groups too,
go to
but
them
not on
and
the
say,
same
look,
scale. There are the
We
old,
favor
the senior
health
citizens, as
security
Americans
for all
call them,
Americans.
who, together with various
We
racial
favor
and ethnic
healthcare
minority groups,
as
came
a
out in
right for
support
all
of Kennedy
Americans.
in his call for
Come
a
here this
national health
morning
insurance scheme.
to first of all to express my very
Under
great
this,
sense of
all individuals
appreciation
except the elderly and the
for
poor
the kind
would
of
pay into the
working
scheme.
partnership that we have
Everyone in
been
the
able to
country would be
fashion
covered for nearly all
to
medical
try and
costs.
pass this
It's a health system that already
health care
operates
for
in
all
several other
Americans
countries.
legislation.
Kennedy
Make no
later
no
shifted
group
his
in our
position
society
closer to Jimmy Carter's,
has been in the
saying
vanguard of the
employers should
fight
provide
for
more health
decent quality
insurance for
health
their
care
workers, with
as
the government
your
paying for the remainder. But any new national scheme would obviously cost a lot of money, and Kennedy's critics say the cost would be too high.
And you understand, my friends, will receive over the period of these next several years.
Witnesses today are thoroughly familiar with the history of the LEA program.
Senator Kennedy in Washington, one of the countless congressional committee hearings he's attended in recent years.
Vital goal of improving police services. So we'll welcome both of those gentlemen. They've both come up.
He became a senator in 1963 at the age of 30. His political career started quietly, but after Robert's assassination, he assumed more responsibility as new leader of the clan. His stature and influence grew accordingly. He was serving at one point
but to devote 1/4 of the attention and the time and the efforts and the energies to
add to his own political clout. In the Senate, he has won respect from
varies,
both sides
obviously,
of the floor
under the
for his
formulas of
powers
different
as a
areas.
debater and legislator.
Clearly, it would seem to me that in this balance which you mentioned about trying to ensure both the state and the local interest to control, that this is a balancing factor.
Ted Kennedy to set up a powerful campaign towards the White House. Curiously, if he does win the Democratic nomination ahead of Carter, it'll be the first time this century that an incumbent president is lost to a rival within his own party. But Carter has many obvious advantages. He has the prestige of office and control over the party machine and over federal funds. All good reasons why Kennedy, still comparatively young, might hold back and not challenge Carter. And in October last year, Kennedy was
makes you so reluctant since so many Democrats seem to favor you? Is it merely a matter of time? You think the time is wrong now?
I think I've basically supported the president. I did on the Panama, I do on the agreements for SALT, I do on comprehensive test ban, I do in areas to try and deal with welfare. So I think that many of the positions that he's taken, I've been in support, and I think that that's really the critical issue.
There has been a basic split.
A year later, things had changed. Just before Teddy's declaration, Kennedy's and Carter's appeared together at the opening in Boston of the John F. Kennedy Memorial Library. The president appeared unconcerned by walking into the Kennedys' den, as it were, nor by the increasing speculation that Ted Kennedy was on the point of throwing down his challenge. In fact, it was smiles all round. But Carter is reported to have told his aides in no uncertain manner that when the time comes, he'll demolish the Kennedy challenge in a manner that will leave Teddy wondering what hit him. Even here, he couldn't resist inserting a playful jibe at the senator into his appreciation of Brother John.
I never met him, but I know that John Kennedy loved politics. He loved laughter, and when the two came together, he loved that best of all. For example, in a press conference in March 1962, when the ravages of being president were beginning to show on his face, he was asked this two-part question. Mr. President, your brother Ted said recently on television that after seeing the cares of office on you, he wasn't sure he would ever be interested in being president.
Teddy kept his sense of humor, but returned with the weapon which he's convinced will demolish Carter, the Kennedy legend.
On behalf of our family that loved him so deeply, I express the gratitude we feel to those who made Jack's journey with us. We welcome the wide circle of friends from home and overseas gathered here
who found so much inspiration in his life, so much warmth in his friendship, so much pain in his loss. We recall those years of grace, that time of hope. The spark still glows. The journey never ends. The dream shall never die.
The dedication of the Memorial Library took place amid increasing speculation about a new Kennedy move. And within hours, Kennedy's top advisors had finalized plans for a big fundraising campaign. When $5,000 made up of small donations have been raised in at least 20 states, Kennedy is qualified for federal campaign funds equal to other candidates. The campaign is now well underway, and the host of Kennedy's supporters are flushed with a new excitement after years of doubt and uncertainty. But it's the past, not the future, that could make or break Ted Kennedy. Chappaquidick has become a household word, still full of meaning and emotion for most Americans. As surely as Dyke's Bridge is marked with this anonymous reminder of that July night in 1969, so is Ted Kennedy himself scarred forever by the incident.
It will remain a personal tragedy for me. I've accepted full responsibility for it. There isn't a day of my life that goes by in which I don't feel a sense of anguish and a sense of loss about it. And that will continue as long as I live. And I'll do the best I can in responding to questions that I get fully, to respond to those questions fully and completely. But I don't know any possible additional factors that would be able to come out other than those which have come out. But I will answer questions on it.
And so Senator Kennedy feels he can overcome the past and get to the White House like his brother John before him. But the past will also provide much ammunition. He's sure to have a very hard fight ahead, even before the decisive Democratic convention in New York.
Does that affect your judgment?
No, that wouldn't be the decision. That
See ya. How you been?